Okay, let's talk about 2026, because that's the year a nutritional bombshell absolutely dropped. Imagine this. You've got two of the most trusted health authorities in the country telling you to eat in completely opposite ways. That is exactly what happened, and it kicked off this massive controversy about what we should really be putting on our plates. So here's the core of the problem. In the very same year, you had the US government and the American Heart Association releasing dietary advice that was just worlds apart. And we're not talking about some minor disagreement here. This was a fundamental clash over the very definition of a healthy meal. And the timing just made everything even more confusing. On January 7th, boom, the federal government's official guideline comes out. Then, just a couple of months later, on March 31st, the American Heart Association drops its own massive report. This rapid-fire conflicting advice basically left everyone caught in the middle. But before we get into the main showdown, it's really important to see how the AHA's statement also cleared up some other big, nagging debates in nutrition. These are issues that people like Professor Lin had actually been pointing out for years. First up, the whole fish oil question. For years, right, we were told these supplements were amazing for heart health, but the AHA guideline was crystal clear. For most of us, there's no proven benefit. In fact, there might even be a risk of an irregular heartbeat. Their advice? So simple. Skip the pill, eat the fish. And you know what? This wasn't some radical new idea. It perfectly illustrates a point made years earlier. Way back in 2018, Professor Lin put it beautifully, saying omega-3 from your plate is vibrant, while omega-3 from a pill bottle is basically dying. So this 2026 guideline was really just science catching up and confirming what the evidence had shown all along. Okay, next up, salt. We've all seen those claims online, right, that low-salt diets are somehow dangerous. Well, the AHA guideline just cut right through all that noise. It stated definitively that high-salt intake raises blood pressure, a huge risk factor. Their advice didn't waver. Stick with low-sodium foods. And then, oh man, the seed oil saga. There was this viral claim going around that seed oils are super toxic. And it wasn't just from random influencers, even the health secretary was saying it. But the AHA's scientific statement directly shut that down, recommending oils like soybean and canola as part of a heart-healthy diet. It was just this huge disconnect between the chatter and the actual science. All right, so now we get to the main event, the showdown. This is where we put the two guidelines head-to-head and you can really see the conflict. And just look at how fundamental these disagreements are. For protein, the feds say focus on animal sources. The AHA says prioritize plants. For grains, the government puts whole grains at the bottom. The AHA says they're crucial. You see the same thing with dairy, full fat versus low fat. And with fats, it's a straight-up battle, butter versus vegetable oils. These aren't small differences. These are polar opposites. So you have to wonder, right? How on earth do two major official health bodies in the same country come to such wildly different conclusions? Is the science really that confusing, or is something else going on here? Well, the answer, or at least a really big clue, seems to be hiding in plain sight, right there in the official title of the AHA's document. It's all in those first two words. See, by calling their report a scientific statement, the AHA wasn't just picking a fancy name. They were sending a message, a powerful one. They were signaling that their recommendations are grounded purely in rigorous, evidence-based science. The implication, of course, is that the federal guidelines might be influenced by other things, like, say, politics or industry pressure. So after all this back and forth, what does this actually mean for you and me? How are we supposed to navigate our next meal when the experts can't seem to agree? Well, if we decide to follow the science-first approach that the AHA took, their recommendations actually boil down to some pretty clear, simple principles. You want a diet loaded with fruits, vegetables, and whole grains. Get your protein mostly from plants. Use liquid oils instead of animal fats like butter. Go for low-fat or fat-free dairy. Keep the salt down. And maybe most importantly, focus on whole foods, not the super-processed stuff. Ultimately, this whole 2026 controversy leaves us with a really critical question. When the official advice is a total mess, it kind of forces you to become your own health detective. You have to ask, where am I getting my information? Whose evidence do I trust? And at the end of the day, how do I decide what's for dinner tonight?